I was born in Burma, became a refugee before World War II, born to a Jain family. My father was almost Gandhian in his principles and everything. He believed very strongly in Jainism, and he inculcated that values in us. We became refugees, very tough life after coming back to India in 1941. And I just turned 85, by the way. But you know, today's 85 is a new 65. And today's 65 is a new 45. And today's 45 is midlife crisis, which is exactly one of the key things we'll talk about, how to avoid midlife crisis using Jainism principles in our personal life. And as Vishal mentioned, there is no contradiction whatsoever between spirituality, tenets of Jainism, and a professional career. We are all living examples of that. I came to America in 1961 as a foreign graduate student, and I promised my family I will remain a vegetarian. At that time, it was very hard. First of all, everybody wants to put pressure to behave like Americans, whether those are your classmates or not. I have all kinds of interesting stories I can go on. I'll take one anecdote and get into the presentation. A major celebration in America is called Thanksgiving. It's a very unique concept. Thanking, in fact, the natives when the pilgrims arrived and in Mayfair, about giving them the corn, hospitality, etc. And the Thanksgiving is becoming just like a Valentine's Day, just like Mother's Day is becoming international because of the fundamental tenet of gratitude, showing gratitude of what somebody helped you. So I went to an American family as a guest of the family, and they did not know I'm a vegetarian. And now there was a dilemma. What do I feed with this person? Of course, there's a bread, there's a cranberry juice. They said, okay, what we can do is that in the turkey itself, they put some stuffing, which is vegetarian. They said, you can eat the stuffing. Isn't that interesting? I said, of course, I cannot eat the stuffing. I still remember those dialogues. But I think the principles of having strong belief systems anchors you in life. And I'll talk about three major areas where Jainism is becoming what I would call the most contemporary ancient religion. And I've done presentations in this area in many of the places, but today I'll focus on three major crises we are experiencing. Some are personal, some are more societal crises, etc. So let's go through the presentation. So please open up the slides, Vishal, if you can, or Neeraj, whoever is managing.
I will. You can see the slide, sir?
Yeah, I can see the slide. So the title is Rediscovering Jainism. Jainism, of course, has been ancient religion. It is being rediscovered, especially for the contemporary life. I don't know whether the audience knows, but now we have more than 20 universities who have Jainism chairs and now professorships, mostly non-Indians, surprisingly. It is the religion that is being taught in the doctoral programs at top departments of religion, such as University of Chicago, Yale University, just goes on and on. And it's just gratifying to see how much people are finding meaning in our religion, which we took it for granted. So this is making us more conscious about what we may be doing unconsciously even. So the title is Rediscovering Jainism for the Contemporary World. My colleague, Dr. Sulekh Jain, for example, often had mentioned that Jainism in any academic literature is a footnote religion. Somebody will and say, if you wanted to know more. So let's go to the next slide, please. So Jainism is the most contemporary ancient religion. Tenets of Jainism, such as ahimsa, aparigraha, and anekantavad, are based on, surprisingly, this very scientific, which is what I found fascinating more as a scholar academician. We look at a scientific evidence, but it's based upon both clinical as well as scientific understanding of three disciplines: ecology on the one hand, sociology, which is institutions and how they behave with each other, and psychology, which is a personal journey. The key concept of Jainism is mindfulness. all it does is make us conscious about what we say, what we do, what we behave. The mindfulness is a fundamental concept, and we are not mindful quite often. And I'll give you an example. As a vegetarian, of course, we eat lots of vegetables, fruits. All the waste, we used to put it in the garbage disposal in America. Till about 10 years ago, my wife and I figured out why not put it in the backyard. So we began to have every day all the waste of the vegetable fruits, we put it in the backyard. Within 24 to 48 hours, it's taken away completely by birds, by animals, by insects. We have no idea. You learn quite a lot that nature is the best waste manager. It is not humans who can teach nature or shape nature, but nature can shape human beings. Learning from nature is very important. And that's what Jainism says. Just be conscious of what you do, how you impact positively, negatively on society, but also conscious about how somebody else can teach you. There's a very good Asian saying that when the student is ready, the teacher will show up. I love that saying. It's the student who has to be ready to learn. Teachers are everywhere. Teachers can be your teachers, gurus. We had a Teachers' Day last week, for example. Teachers can be mountains. Teachers can be peers. Nature may be the best teacher. And it basically, the fundamental concept of Jainism is really not compassion as we think, but it is mindfulness. It means conscious, just being conscious, awareness about what's happening around us, caring, consciously caring for other human beings, other lives in general, and temperance, everything doing in moderation. It is the moderation concept that was taken over by Buddhism eventually as a core concept, but really ultimately turns out to be back to mindfulness is a very key one, because we do things out of habit and we don't even know what we are doing or what the consequences are of what we do on ourselves, on environment, and on society at large. And I think that's a daily practical realization, just knowing what we are doing. Next slide, please. So what are the three contemporary issues? I'm doing a lot of research in this area, and I'm finding principles of Jainism helping me conceptualize very well. The biggest crisis is sustainability and ecology. You can see today earthquake in Morocco that took place, for example. There is a flooding going on all over the world, whether it's in China or whether it is in India, for example. We are having massive heat wave. European Union and England are suffering from a massive heat. Ecology is imbalanced. But it's not a phenomenon for generations or thousands of years. It is a more recent phenomenon. And that happened because as human beings in the Industrial Revolution, we had some wrong theories. The theory was that all the industrial raw materials like copper, iron is inorganic. Nature is organic by definition. Doesn't matter whether it takes thousands of years to produce coal or iron or whatever the mineral is. And we overexploited it with a belief system that humans are the most superior living organism. Jainism fundamental principle is that all souls are equal, whether those are in vegetation, those are in animals, those are in marine life, as I will talk about. So there are three principles that in industrialization we did which are wrong. By going for economies of scale, we overproduced, which means now we have to store. The fundamental divorce we created between production and consumption is a reason why we have so much of climate change problem. Because now we have to store the product, you have to ship it out, that all puts carbon footprint. The biggest carbon footprint, surprisingly, is happening not in the factory as we think, because those are the visible symbols about pollution, etc., but it is at home. 80 to 75% of all of the carbon footprint is created by having things at home like refrigeration, for example. Most of the homes built, at least in Western world, are made from chemical processed materials. And also, next most place is the supermarkets. 24/7, there are freezers running constantly refrigeration-wise, and that's creating the carbon footprint. Surprisingly, it is now being recognized more and more that the intervention has to happen at the individual level, at the household level, not just at the factory level through public policy. And of course, the industrialization of China which took place in the last 30 years, industrialization of India that is taking place, we call it modernization. But the biggest continent available, about 1 billion people, is Africa, that is just about to industrialize itself, which means Mother Nature cannot regenerate enough to support so much population, especially living in the more modern way. There is a huge ecological cost of convenience. Everything we made it convenient, but it is having enormous damage to the environment. We are just not conscious about our activities. So that's clearly one major area, and I'll show you how principles of Jainism helps about sustainability, which every student today is taught to learn. Every student is aware. In fact, many of the young professionals like the Z generation are asking corporations, what are you doing for sustainability? Are you contributing toward the climate change and carbon footprint, or are you actually solving the problem? Is a very key. For a talented person is not saying what is my career, what's my salary, but what are you doing from a CSR viewpoint, corporate social responsibility, all over the world, surprisingly. So we are finding that as a part of our daily living as corporate leadership itself, we have to understand that we are making impact on the society, not just on ourselves, but also on the ecology. So cost of convenience is what I'm calculating right now. We have made it everything very convenient, which is very good for us. Our life is much easier compared to the agricultural age, for example, but we are paying a price. So how do you reverse carbon footprint? How do you reverse climate change? Surprisingly, it's possible if you use Jainism principles, which I'll show you a little later on. Second major is a very key area. We right now have in front of our eyes what I would call a disintegration of social governance or societal governance. We are believing so strongly on individuality and the individual freedom. All of our young grandchildren, for me, grandchildren and great-grandchildren at my age, feel like I am the center of attention. I have no obligation to parents. I have no obligations to society at large. I need to satisfy my own needs. Our religion is totally contrary. Most Asian religions believe institutions are equally important as individuals. So balancing the two will be very important. So for example, family and the family as a unit, we are today living like roommates. I have a whole chapter in a new book I'm writing called The Roommate Nation. Nobody wants to eat together. There is no time. We barely get together, and eating like a chore rather than an enjoyable learning from one generation to the other or conversations, and everybody rushes into their own corner or a room. Somebody's watching YouTube, somebody's doing WhatsApp, somebody watching television, somebody's talking on the phone. We live like roommates. So what happens to the unit of family as a societal institution? Same thing is happening with faith, which is why we have sessions like this one to say, how can we bond back using technology or preferably in congregation? Before the industrialization, where we taught about 3 hours of learning, reading, writing, and arithmetic, there were 3 C's of learning. And how can you bring this ancient 3 C's of learning into the internet age or into the digital age? And what are those 3 C's? We learned from the community. Community was a huge social governance mechanism. You lived in the neighborhood where everybody knew everybody. That's not the case today. Community was a big governance mechanism. How do you behave right or how do you behave wrong? Second one was congregation, faith. Before formal religions came in like Jainism, Hinduism, Buddhism, or Western religions, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, 6 major religions, we actually had a governance by sort of a congregation. You got together on a belief system, whether it's a ancient worship, which is a pagan worship as it is called, but there was a faith-based learning of some sort which says this is right or wrong. And of course, the third one was craft. You learned under a master guild something to make it like a goldsmith, somebody who makes vessels, whatever it is. Apprenticeship program not only gave you the skill how to do it right, but values. Values in quality, values in taking pride in the work you do. All of them are very meaningful. So 3 C's of learning are becoming now more contemporary back again. And that's where the Jainism as a religion, with well-codified religion, becomes very appropriate, because it's easy to see the codification of the knowledge, how it can be actually implemented on a daily basis through mindfulness. Third one is very important area. By the way, the second one I do want to mention, as we increase the diversity all over the world, America is becoming very diverse. Every culture from the world is coming here, is settling here. So we have a crisis of values. Whose faith do we agree on? Is values, ethics are going to come from faith themselves, or will that be a secular ethics? There's a debate going on right now whether who says religion is the only place where we can get values. Can we get values, code of conduct by other mechanisms? The academic debates are going on. So there's a crisis of whose values should we believe, which is where one of the key principles of Jainism, Anekantavad, becomes very relevant, as I will talk about in a moment. And there's a huge influence of social media. For example, TikTok is the best example recently, but so has been the case for Facebook or WhatsApp. Instagram is very popular, and they are shaping our minds more so than our faith or our family or our community, for example. And that's creating enormous side effects or consequences that we need to understand, be mindful about those consequences, and try to see how we can avoid it, or how we can prevent it, or how we can minimize it at least. Searching, third major area is we are all searching for meaning in life. The amount of loneliness among young people, and I've seen similarly with senior citizens, is mind-boggling. People don't have an anchor in life. They're doing things, but they have no meaning. And in business, it is even more. If you make money without meaning, it's meaningless. The more money you make without some purpose in life, the more empty you feel inside. People like us as academic professors, we become coaches and advisors to chairmen of large companies. In private conversations, you can see that loneliness. And if you do not give back to the community, which is one of the key principles of Jainism, giving back constantly while you're earning, not when you retire, if you don't give it back, the society shuts you out also. Society, I will isolate that he's a taker, he's an exploiter of all the resources that the community provides, the nature provides, but not contributing back toward its regeneration, or basically, contributing back to survive or grow the ecology, for example, or the community, for example. There's a huge rise in global mental health. In fact, most of the violence is arising primarily because of the violence because of the mental health, and looking for purpose-driven life. Surprisingly, Christianity has also talked about purpose-driven life. Rick Warren is a great writer, and he has a book that is probably 50 million copies or so. So every faith is trying to provide a meaning, but Jainism seems to have a direct linkage, but purpose-driven life that I will articulate. So let's go to the next slide, please. My voice is breaking up is what I got as a message. Is that true?
No, it is fine, sir.
It is fine here as well.
Okay. So sustainability, probably the biggest single area of focus worldwide is now sustainability. As you said, we see the evidence of hurricanes becoming more violent, heat waves becoming more. That's fascinating. So one of the first principles Jainism teaches is that all forms of life are equal. And therefore you cannot harm all forms of life, no harm to any living forms of life, but we extend that notion beyond humans. We say all forms of life means marine life, all forms of life means animal life, but also plants. I think no other religion has gone to that extent of having the principle of ahimsa, or absolute non-violence, as I call it, across so many things. So we are trained in the family not to kill insects. Can we take the insects out, whether it's a mosquito or fly, or a serpent, or a cockroach, rather than kill it, which is a typical instinct, and humans are so powerful one can do it, but instead saying that they have a life of their own, there's a jiv or a soul in every living organism. Can we put it out into the nature? Let nature do what it does in terms of harmonious coexistence, etc. Very important principle. Now, this creates crisis in our family. When my son was 4 years old, now he's 56 years old, came running to my house. Madhu, my wife, and I talked to him. He said, in my school, the school teacher squatted the fly and killed the fly. And he said, I screamed. I said, you are not supposed to kill any living beings. This is the contemporary life in conflict with belief system. The teacher said, it's okay, you're only 4 years old. He was trying to console the child, my son, to say, it's okay. It's very interesting. So these are the kinds of things that we need to broaden our knowledge through our religion to say that there is a possibility of changing people's lives or thinking, which may be more based upon other cultures and socialization processes. But there is something new here that one can do, which is happening about vegan and vegetarianism, which I will talk in a moment. So ahimsa is a very key anchor. Not only it was used by Mahatma Gandhi for social activism, like Freedom March in India or in South Africa. Mandela did the same thing in South Africa, a peaceful, passive resistance, which is key concept of nature in general. Nature is a living, breathing. If you abuse it, start non-cooperation. Rather than cooperate with you or collaborate with you, it simply shuts down. As we are finding right now, bee production is shut down, for example. Bees are not just cooperating anymore, which is very fascinating to watch as a lead indicator about the environmental issues. So ahimsa becomes a very key principle, but it is used everywhere. We have funded Ahimsa Center at University of California. The center actually teaches teachers for high school education, come for a 6-8 months paid by the government, National Science Foundation grant, and teaches them how to teach in the classroom to remain non-violent. So all kinds of experiments are going on using our tenets. Second key area, as I mentioned, mindfulness, mindful consumption. So we are basically strongly suggesting that a vegetarian plant-based diet is as good as meat-based diet. In fact, I did research in the 70s on what is called as low-cost, high-protein foods, and one of the best protein strains I found was chickpeas. Fish is another one that comes about in some cultures, but chickpeas was very fascinating. It produces protein on less acreage of land than what a cow will produce, which is what the Western thinking about eating beef, for example. And we have rules, regulations, even in Hinduism, not just Jainism, about not eating beef, for example. It's a much more a costly way of generating protein. We need protein in the body, but it comes from plant and vegetation. And it is fortunately becoming more and more popular in the Western world, but more importantly, more and more a necessity. So plant-based diet, ultimately vegan diet, which means there is no saturated fat coming from animal, only from plant-based. And it's very, I've done a lot of research on this again. So if you take cheese as a saturated fat coming from dairy products, Northern European cheese fat content is about 40%, Swiss cheese and others. I go to the Mediterranean area, cheese concept is still there, but it's the mozzarella, Parmesan, etc., feta cheese, Greek and Italy would be the prime examples. That fat content is 2.5%. And you go further toward equator, the concept of cheese drops from all cultures. It is taken over by olive oil, palm oil, coconut oil, and in Mexico by avocado. So in India, Northern Indians, Delhi area, paneer is a daily diet. South India has no concept of paneer at all. Think about it. So there's a very nice organized system produced there. More and more you are toward the tropical areas, more will be plant-based diet generally. Meat or poultry will be less and less. Very interesting area. So there's a lot of practical reality of tenets of Jainism. So vegetarian and vegetable diet for personal reasons, personal health, societal reasons, in terms of impact on the community in which you live, and of course the plant. We have invented, or we have in our religion, the concept of fasting. Parishan is starting for my part of the Jainism branch. I think we are starting next week on September 12th. Our Parishan begins for 7-8 days, and we will have about 50 very young people fasting for 7, 8, 9, 10 days. Some fast for 2 weeks, for example. Fasting is detoxification. And intermittent fasting, which traditional Jains do, not eating after sunset and not eating before sunrise or a couple of hours before sunrise, there's a physical, biological meaning. It's basically detoxification. Whereas in the Western world, with convenience, we are snacking all the time. So many of the principles of Ayurveda medicine are built into our religion also. Intermittent fasting is becoming now almost a fad and a fashion. There are clinics out there where people go to learn how to do intermittent fasting, which we did as a daily necessity. Next slide, please. So how do you have nature generate itself back again, which I think is very possible. And that is including mindful materialism, which is the third principle. So mindful consumption is first. Respect for all forms of life is another one, which is ahimsa. But the third one is mindful materialism, which is aparigraha. The main point around here is very simple.
Bye.
The more you possess, more you have ownership, more you'll have issues about ownership themselves. It will create burden on your mind. You'll worry about, say, theft, for example. So more and more young people are learning we need to own things. Sharing economy is a big, big initiative. Why not just share the economy so long as it is not environmentally damaging? So limited possession of material goods, including homes, garments, clothing, and grains or food. Aparigraha is a very key concept, which means basically putting a value by saying have limited possessions, but anything excess you have, give it back to the society. We are a steward of the nature, steward of the society, steward of the community. How do we give it back? And the last concept is the key one. I think this is the only religion that does not believe in superiority of humans, Homo sapiens over everybody else. All souls are equal. And one can be reborn into a soul that is something which is not the human nature, but some other animal or vegetation or whatever it is. I think equality or egalitarianism of soul is a very fundamental principle which creates respect for life. And as Homo sapiens, our main differentiation is that we have a cognitive capacity. We are thinking, we can have thoughts, we can have a language, we are speaking, we can influence others, we can actually nurture nature if you wanted to, and Jainism has ways to show you how to do it. So these four things are very important in our daily life for sustainability. So let's go to the next area, which is disintegration of society. The more we have the diversity, cultural diversity, faith diversity, lifestyle diversity, and as we have more diversity, so the average doesn't matter anymore, it's the range or the variance, as we call it, statistics that matters. Acceptance of diversity of views and values is very key as a way of managing harmony. Peaceful coexistence, whatever word you would like, and that is unaccountable. That there is a truth out there, it is not the truth we are talking about, it's the perspective or my perception about the truth. And of course, perceptions vary by our ideology. So if I'm one political party, I can see the world of economic growth or not growth in a one way. If I'm a different ideology, I see it very differently. We always have the debate between capitalism perspective versus a communist perspective versus socialistic perspective, for example. But this is true in daily life. And of course, the typical fable that we use all the time to make this very obvious is the 5 blind men and the elephant. The blind man who touches actually the tail thinks it's a snake, Blind man who touches the trunk, for example, has a different meaning. Those who touch the feet, they think it's a tree. Just goes on and on. It's all fable we learn at youngsters pretty much. But it says that reality is not what you perceive. So you're right, your perspective is as right as my perspective. There is no right or wrong. So in my class, I teach my students. Right now, I have a class of 58 students. And I basically say, in my class, there is no right or wrong answer. Because once you decide, I am right and you are wrong, you have no harmonious relationship. And this is unfortunately what happens with social media, with politics, etc. How do we counterbalance? Counterbalancing is clearly the principle of Anekantwad. Everybody's right. Which also breaks down the logic and underlying mathematics of true and false. So the concept of true and false is questioned by the religion, which becomes so meaningful in scientific inquiry. Because most of the science is based on mathematics, which is based upon only two principles. Logic is a very key component. Logic is true or false. Binary data is binary data, but today this religion says it's more than that. So I find it very fascinating, linking Anekantwad to multiple perspectives and tolerance for each other perspectives, no matter what faith or lifestyle you belong to. Unity in diversity through solving societal and community problems. We have always believed that community is very important. And what can we do together, no matter what faith we belong to, or what lifestyles we belong to, what family upbringing we belong to? How can we get together for something higher than our daily life? Which is why community service is a very key component as volunteers. We need to contribute back, find a cause that rises above our own ideologies and differences. So societal and community problems is becoming very mainstream. In the US, in high school, for example, last 3 years, you have to do community service. If you want to get into a top university, your grades are not enough. At the university in Bangalore, which is named after me, Jagdish Sheth School of Management, for MBA programs or PGP, the first term itself, students are broken into teams and they go and look into very poor neighborhoods, almost slum areas, identify a problem that the community is struggling, take on the challenge of identifying the problem and solving the problem before the term is over, at least making recommendations. You begin to feel a sense of belonging yourself. You get a meaning in life to say, I'm doing something other than just make money or a career. And neighborhood involvement is very key. And how do we serve the community? By 3 ways. Give our time, give our expertise or talent, and give our money, depending upon what is possible, or all three that's possible. So this is the way Jainism tells us how to have back again respect for institutions and societal governance. Last area, searching for meaning in life, which is, I think, the main focus of your series here. Searching for meaning. This is very simple. This is the only religion that says, search for meaning within. Search for personal growth within. Search for removing all of the things that come to as what I call difficulties in life. Suffering is a key word that's used in many of the other parts of the religion. Self-awareness, as I mentioned, mindfulness is a key concept. Conquering self-destructive habits. And we have identified 4 or 5 habits, but the 3 are very key. Anger is a very key. Anger is self-destructive. It doesn't impact the other person, it impacts you. If you are a boss, if you are angry, it hurts you more than somebody else. In a family, if you are angry, it is more taking your impact on your biology, not only psychology, not the recipient of the anger. It's the giver of the anger. Ego, of course, we always talk about it. If you have ego, then you will stop learning from anybody else. And in the process, you will be becoming less competent, actually. And the last one is possessions. Aparigraha that we talked about. So self-awareness. And as I mentioned here, I am the one who destroys me. Outside world doesn't destroy you. You destroy yourself. We have self-destructive habits. Whether it's gambling on the one hand, some people have, drinking on the other hand, some people may have, or whatever habits you have. Even small habits, repetition of the same behavior again and again forms a habit. And because of that, you begin to get habituated or addicted for that matter. So the religion here talks about how to minimize that. Self-learning, which is the next area. We are constantly good learners. Homo sapiens have the capacity to learn, has a capacity to increase the knowledge, and self-learning, as opposed to learning, as I said, when the student is ready, the teacher will show off. So self-learning can happen through experiential learning, which is know-how, cognitive learning, theories, frameworks, know why, but meditation and contemplation are built into say, here is a ritual or a way, set aside time for self-learning, self-reflection. And the last one is self-enlightenment, which is why we believe a Tirthankar is a good model. They are all human beings, but they use their cognitive capacity, began to think internally quite a lot through meditation and enhance that knowledge to a level that is exceptional. And they conquer all of the sufferings and all of the bad habits that one would have otherwise. And they come out with a purpose-driven life. There is no upper limit of self-realization. In fact, in my classes, I studied and I teach Maslow's need hierarchy. Safety, survival need, then self-esteem, love and affection need, then self-esteem and independence, and ultimately self-actualization. It all comes from the Hinduism, Jainism, religious tenets. This comes from Jainism quite a lot. So basically, as Tirthankara, you can conquer. You have the willpower, you have the determination, as we showed during fasting, that I can actually conquer my body for 7-8 days, no, nothing whatsoever to eat, etc. I think it's very interesting. Willpower is a very key concept, which is mindfulness again. So Jina, the victor, is a key principle. Purpose-driven life is very important in self-enlightenment. I tell you why this is so important today. More for professional career, not just for personal life. Half-life of knowledge is getting shorter and shorter. In the technology world, it is 18 months and declining. I studied Fortran language way back when, or BASIC, which was a complex language. But today you have a C++ is gone, R is gone now. It's good, it looks like. You have the generative AI, artificial intelligence, you have the chat box, you have the chat GPT coming in. It's very fascinating. Management knowledge the same way. Half-life of management knowledge is so declining. By the time an MBA graduates in 2 years, half the knowledge is not there. I never heard of chat GPT till about 6 months ago. I knew about 2 years ago, the accounting people use it, the underlying cryptocurrency, underlying technology. I'm right now learning, for example, quantum computing, which is the next wave arising. I have no idea. And I've been teaching 60 years. So I have a very obsolete knowledge. If I continue not learning, I'll be remaining behind. I'll be ignorant, actually. The religion motivates you, forces you to constantly learn new things. The more you have the obsession to learn, the longer the life, the happier the life, which is very key. So let me summarize and then open up for Q&A. Next page, please. So Jainism is the most contemporary ancient religion. These contradictions are always important. It's contemporary, but it is ancient at the same time. The 3 tenets of Jainism, non-violence, non-possession, and tolerance for diversity are anchored to both clinical and scientific understanding. Many of the scientific inquiries are going back to like the cell structure in plants, for example, the way we put the mumti or the clothing in front of the mouth for bacteria and virus transfer, which we learned quite a lot through the pandemic, for example. It's the same thing. People are going back to ancient wisdom. And Jainism has more than most of the religions from a practical living, day-to-day coexistence with nature, coexistence with community, etc. And gives you norms or guidelines to say what you should and should not do, pretty much. So it's very scientific, which I find amazing, because I'm more trained as a scientist. Very, very sort of a skeptical about anything that's ritualistic things. But rituals have reason and meaning why they are there in place by any faith, whatever faith you belong to. So scientific understanding of ecology, sociology, and psychology, 3 disciplines are involved. It's very holistic religion in the process. Next page, please. Respect for all living organisms and mindful consumption and mindful possessions are key to sustainability. Tolerance of alternative perspectives and community engagement. Second part we don't do as well. I think as Jains, we need to engage in community other than religious activities are key to social governance or social harmony. Self-awareness, self-learning, and self-enlightenment are key to realizing individual potential. Thank you so much.